待たせいたしました。これより
Thank you very much for waiting. I'd like to now start this session. Moderator. Moderator is Mr. Oskar Miel, who is the managing partner of the Rakuten FinTech Fund. We have Elliot Han, the managing director of the Argon Group. And then we have Mr. Mike Kayamori, co-founder and CEO of QUOINE. So now let's get started.
Okay. Yes. Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the last session of the day before the closing speech. We're very excited to have such a full room of attendees. Today's session is about the revolution in cryptocurrencies. We have named the topic Crypto Boom or Bust. As many members of the audience know, cryptocurrencies have risen in value in an amazing way over the last year. And what the main topic of this panel, we want to question, is this just a pure fad? Is this something that's happening momentarily? Or is there more substance to what's happening in this new asset class? To this effect, we have two great guests. To the far left is Mike Kayamori, founder and CEO of QUOINE, one of the leading digital exchanges. And Mike is actually Japanese, has a great background in finance and technology, having worked at SoftBank, and is also a fellow Harvard Business School graduate. To my left, we have Elliot Han, who is working or is the founder and CEO of the Argon Group. Argon Group is in the distribution of digital assets, actually the crossover between finance and the new digital economy, coming from California. Also with a great background in technology and investment banking at institutions such as Credit Suisse and Goldman Sachs. So please, let's give them a warm applause for being here. Thank you very much. So this said, I'm going to turn it over. What we're gonna do today in terms of this session, each one of our guests will give a brief presentation about their business and what they do in this space. And after that, we will go through a few slides about exactly what's happening in this space, followed by Q&A, dividing our sessions into three topics. The first topic is going to be the current status of the crypto world. We're going to give you some facts. We're going to explain what's happening, and then we're going to discuss it. The second session, we're going to talk about blockchain, and more specifically, the applications of blockchain, or the future applications of blockchain. And finally, we're going to talk about ICOs, which stand for initial coin offerings. This has been like the new wave of finance, very interesting. And also we're gonna discuss the pros and cons of what's happening. So this said, I'm gonna turn it over to Kayamori-san.
Should I sit down or as you wish? Thank you, Oskar, and thank you for inviting me today. So I would like to quickly introduce who I am and what I do. So I'm the founder, CEO of QUOINE. We are one of the largest exchanges in the world. But previously starting QUOINE, I worked at SoftBank. So I was in charge of SoftBank's Asia operations, joint ventures, partnerships. Also, I headed Gunho Asia as a chief investment officer, investing in mobile games. And prior to that, I lived in Silicon Valley as a VC, investing in early-stage internet and technology companies, and started out my career at Mitsubishi, which is a Japanese conglomerate. So what we do, so at QUOINE, we manage and build and operate a crypto token exchange. Also, we're building financial services on top of the blockchain. Last September, so the Japanese government was the first nation to regulate and license cryptocurrency exchanges. And we were the first global exchange to be licensed, one of the first 11 exchanges that were licensed and regulated in Japan. As you can see, we offer a sophisticated exchange, one of the most advanced from a matching engine perspective, but also I would like to stress, if there's a pointer, we're all former bankers building a crypto exchange. So not only tech enthusiasts, but former Wall Street people. We knew that there was an opportunity for a proper regulated financial exchange. And we are also an exchange of exchanges. So what does that mean? I believe in a world where anybody can buy cryptocurrencies such as Bitcoin at your local ATM, convenience store, anywhere you want. And all of these places will need liquidity. As you know, in FX or securities, there are Tokyo Stock Exchange and there's banks who provide liquidity, while in the crypto world, there's no such entity. So we can see that over time, it's not only these Bitcoin-specific companies, but public companies, online brokerages, everybody will offer cryptocurrency to the masses, and they will all need to tap into liquidity, and that's where we come up. As you can see, Traders, which is a JASDAQ-listed company, we provide the entire platform for them, and as you can see, it's very similar to our trading platform. We provide the entire backend and also liquidity for this Japanese public listed company. And it's not only Japan. Gibraltar, which is a self-government entity out of the UK, also recently launched or announced to launch their crypto exchange, and we provide their entire platform as well. And in addition to that, I think as Oskar mentioned, ICO is a new method of fundraising, and we operate one of the largest Asia sites on ICOs in crypto-only exchange. So that's where we are, and because we as an exchange, we needed to eat our own dog food, we raised our own ICO last November, and in 3 days we raised about $105 million worth of token, and it's still the largest in Asia to date. So I would like to finish my introduction with this recent survey that we did on our own platform. And as you can see, there's close to 4,000 people who participated in our survey, and we asked them, what does Bitcoin, what does cryptocurrency, what is it to you? And you're surprised at the survey results, right? They were talking about cryptocurrency as the future, right? As a change, as something that you build things, right? So it's not only about speculation or just making a quick profit, it's about the future. And this is the future of finance, and I'm excited to share my experience with you today. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Mike. I'm gonna turn it over to Elliot. Elliot is gonna describe a little bit of his activity at the Argon group.
Sure. So I'm a managing director at the Argon group, and I run our banking practice. And what the Argon group is actually, we're actually a boutique investment bank, just like your traditional Wall Street banks, where we're on the boutique level, and we focus strictly on the digital finance world and the token-based capital markets. So put it simply, we help companies who are looking to ICO. We prepare them for that process, working from the very beginning to the very end of that token generation event. So what I've listed out here is really quickly just some of the basic services that we provide, everything from financial advisory, the placement. We also do the technology. I think that's something that's very different. We help develop the smart contract for your particular token. We also have a proprietary token platform called Token Hub, which is used for token administration and distribution of the actual token. What makes us different? As you probably know, there's a lot of advisors out there. I think we can arguably say that we're probably the first or one of the first advisors to come out into this ICO market, helping companies look to go do a token generation event. We were started in August 2016, before the big wave of ICOs had started coming out to the market. We had started out quite early. And we list some of our little creds here, but I think the point I want to make the most is the bid and the bold, where we actually, our backgrounds of all the members of our team are all traditional ex-Wall Street guys, from anywhere from Goldman Sachs, Credit Suisse, Morgan Stanley. A few of us are also ex-lawyers, me being one of them. So we have both the legal and finance background. And so what we do is we serve as the bridge between your traditional finance as well as the new emerging digital finance market. So just laying out here some of the clients. This is just a small select list. You might or might not have heard. They're all US-based except for Nuggets, which is a UK-based company. But our very first deal, and I think one of the first ICOs in the recent boom in 2017, was Blockchain Capital, which is a very well-known cryptocurrency hedge fund. We helped tokenize their fund. We've also done Civic and Storage. Civic is an ID-related company. Storage is for storage. Science Blockchain is one I like to point out. They're actually based out of LA, and they're quite famous for incubating Dollar Shave Club, which is one of the larger US-based companies that was sold to Unilever for I think just under $1 billion. So these are just a sampling of some of the clients that we work with. We're not US-centric. We focus on also Asia as well. We work with a lot of Chinese-based companies, Korean-based companies, hopefully more Japanese-based companies. But our remit is global. This is just a very short snapshot of our core services. We just break it up into 5 areas. We help with the legal and the finance, helping any sort of company looking to do an ICO in terms of their legal structure, especially with the various jurisdictions and the legal and regulatory overhang and uncertainty. You have to get that right, and I think the members of the team have the right background for that, to cover both legal and finance. Technology, as I mentioned before, we help develop the smart contract. We have a token distribution platform. Marketing, as everyone knows, is probably one of the biggest areas of push that needs to happen in any ICO. So we help completely on the marketing front on both the traditional side, where you're going at maybe your publications, your business type publications, but also on kind of the marketing aspects that are very, I guess, particular to ICOs, like on social media, Telegram channels, et cetera. And then we also have a research function as well. This is a new line of business that we just pretty much started towards the end of last year, and it's actually starting to overtake our core business. With the recent influx of ICOs that have been happening, a lot of companies have raised funds but don't know what to do with it, or they've raised funds and they don't know what's the proper approach. So what we've done is we've developed this program where we do a token sale audit, where we basically go through the entire aspect of the ICO, what they did correctly, incorrectly, any remedies if necessary. But I think most importantly, what I like to point out here is probably, I think the investor relations. A lot of the investors are very anxious now because of the rise of fraud and the rise of a lot of scam ICOs. What are you doing? So we make sure that there's a consistent dialogue with investors who have invested in companies. Obviously, marketing and PR to maintain the momentum. Exchanges looking to put coins on exchanges like QUOINE, and also fund management. I think a lot of times, a lot of these management teams have raised an exorbitant amount of money, which they don't know what to do with. So we help them manage that in the proper way. What's the right balance between crypto and fiat, et cetera. And that's just pretty much it in a short nutshell of what we do at Argon.
Fantastic, Elliot. Thanks very much. So we're gonna open our discussion, and to do that, I just wanted to show a few slides about the state of what's happening in the crypto world with some statistics for the audience. If you look at some of the key facts of what's happening, digital currencies right now have a market capitalization of close to $260 billion. That's actually much larger than most tech companies. If you look at some of the valuations of companies such as Apple or Amazon or Facebook, those are perhaps like 2 to 3 times bigger, but we're talking about a new asset class that has massively grown, especially in value over the last year, with an increase in value of close to 14 times or 362%. ICOs, the new phenomenon that Elliot was talking about, where close to $5 billion have been raised since inception, with over 1,500 ICOs and covering over 20 industries. If we look at what's happened with the Nasdaq index, from the peak in 99 during the last internet revolution, or the so-called internet 1.0, from a peak of close to 4,700, the Nasdaq has grown to close to 7,000. That's over 50%. However, if you look at when the Nasdaq hit bottom, with the index hitting 1,160, there's been an increase in value of the Nasdaq index of close to 5 times. If, however, we look at what has happened in the crypto market, from January of 2017, when the market capitalization of crypto was 17 billion, to the peak of cryptocurrencies, which was close to Christmas or the end of last year, the value has gone up 44 times. 44 times, again, compared to 5 times from the low in Nasdaq, 44 times, with a capitalization of close to 800 billion. And even after the correction that took place in the first 3 months of this year, we still see that the return in cryptocurrency has been 13 times, as I said before, with a capitalization of 260 billion. Now, when you look at these figures, from 17 billion to 800, even down to 260 billion, great fortunes have been lost and made in this space. Also, Japan, our country, is emerging very strongly as the global leader in cryptocurrency, with close to 50% of trading in Bitcoin happening in yen or in Japan, among the largest currencies being traded. And also the most forward-thinking in terms of regulation, where actually in Japan, Bitcoin is accepted as legal tender, is also approved, or there's 11 crypto exchanges in this country, although there's been some problems with some of them, as we know, with CoinCheck, for instance, or Mt. Gox a couple of years ago, and also a self-regulatory organization, which also leads us to regulations. Some countries are more crypto-friendly, such as Japan, Switzerland, little Bermuda, or Singapore. We have some countries that are a bit more conservative, have more mixed regulations, such as the United States, parts of Europe, or South Korea. Incidentally, whenever one of these countries or regions are starting to regulate cryptocurrency, that's when we've seen the correction and the drop in prices. And there's some countries that are basically fairly hostile to the world of crypto, namely China and India, among the largest, also Nepal, and that also has reverberations in terms of value and what can be done in terms of technology. So having said this, we're gonna turn it to our Q&A, and I would like to ask our panelists. I guess what are your thoughts? Is there some people say that actually FX or currency in general, I'm not even talking about digital currencies, but just FX or currency is not exactly an asset class because it's a zero-sum game because of trade, because of currency being a means of exchange. Here, with digital currencies, can those be considered an asset class? Are they good value as investments, and are they sustainable? Mike, perhaps?
Yeah, so I can start out, and thank you, because I look at digital currencies or cryptocurrency as an asset class. The amazing thing is it's part store of value, like a gold, and it's also a medium of exchange. And it has many characteristics that make cryptocurrency the future of money and the future of finance. But then when you look at the numbers, as you mentioned, was it $259 billion of market cap for the entire cryptocurrency industry? That's 1/3 of Amazon, right? So when you think about that, it's still very early. And yes, over the past year, it went up 13x, and then it has gone down, but that's a correction that was necessary, right? Something that goes too fast, too quickly will always need a correction. And once there's a correction, it will continue to go up. I would compare, for example, cryptocurrency more similar to that of a gold. So gold is about close to $8 trillion right now. So when you add the aggregate value of all cryptocurrencies, there's still 35x that it can go to be equivalent of gold. So from that perspective, the long-term opportunity or the value of cryptocurrency has yet to start. That's how I look at it, right? So like last December, when there was a lot of euphoria and craze around cryptocurrency, people were telling me, oh, I wish crypto was $10,000. I mean, Bitcoin was $10,000, then I would buy, right? And that was when Bitcoin was $20,000.
Yeah, now it's trading at around 6,000.
Now it's around 6,000, 7,000. So if you had that same mentality or thought process, it will be a great time to buy right now. But now people are even scared because the fear factor has kicked in. But when you look at the long-term horizon or the opportunity of cryptocurrency, I would say there's immense value right now to participate.
Thank you. Elliot?
I agree pretty much wholeheartedly with what Mike was saying. It's the long-term nature of it. I think we're in too early of a stage right now. It's in its infancy, and obviously because we're in the present, it doesn't feel like it. It feels like it's been around for a while, but rarely does in one's lifetime does a phenomenon like this arise where you can actually actively participate. And as Mike was saying, I think this is a great time to potentially get in. Looking depending on what your own personal views are, because we would never obviously give investment advice. But I think the way I look at it is that I think it is an asset class that is here to stay. It needs to grow through a bit of growing pains to figure out where its position in the world is. And I think this is what it's going through right now. And people just need to be patient.
So let me challenge that a little bit. Everybody in the audience has heard about the tulip mania back in Europe a couple of centuries ago. And most recently, I was in Switzerland, where I was participating at a panel with a few tech entrepreneurs and venture capitalists in Europe. And one of them made this comment, which I thought was quite amusing, that the best use of Bitcoin is actually Bitcoin itself, meaning that people buy Bitcoin because they think they're going to make money with Bitcoin, and that kind of keeps feeding the speculation. However, as a means of exchange, it was being challenged because of the volatility, the rise in value, and as we've actually seen with some payment processors, it's actually very, very difficult to act in that business, and there's been a lot of failures. What do you guys think? Do you think some of these currencies are going to be actually used as valid means of tender? And if so, how and what needs to happen?
Yes, I think it will absolutely happen. It just takes time, right? And I think speculation is a good thing. Like everybody speculates everything, not only financial assets or tulips or bananas or gold or oil or even stocks, right? People speculate and they buy, and they go through these ups and downs, right? But the beauty of, for example, Bitcoin and cryptocurrency is that it has a characteristics or an element of a store of value, right? Because it might go up, I'll buy it now and hold it. But you can also use it as a medium of exchange. You can use it for payments. You can use it for wire transfer. But if it's going to go up, why do it, right? I'd rather hold on to it. So it's still very early, where there's no like crypto derivatives yet. The institutional investors has not come in yet. The regulatory framework is not ready. So when all of these things happen, as a medium of exchange for payments or transfer, it will be used. And actually, people still use that right now as well. Maybe not in markets like the US or Japan or G7, where there's a strong fiat currency and there's a payment method that everybody can use. But in other markets, it will become the preferred payment.
And I'd go so far as to say, as the person who made that comment, I think it's a lazy comment, because it's easy to say that, yeah, of course there is a speculative nature, and as Mike was saying rightly, there's a speculative nature on many things, on comic books, baseballs, I mean, pretty much anything. Because it's so early right now, there needs to be some time, and we need to go through kind of a little bit of a boom and bust, right, to figure out, weed out kind of the bad elements, weed out the speculation, weed out the scams, have regulation get applied, people try to figure out where it works, where it doesn't work. And so that's going to take some time. That can't happen overnight. That's not going to happen in a year. That's going to take several years, if not longer. So I think the point is that if you look at the long-term horizon and look at the fundamentals of it, and how it's not necessarily it's not confined to one country, it's very global. This is something that I think we're on the cusp of something very, very innovative that will be around for a while. Sure, it needs stability, and that will, I think, will come in due time. In fact, people are working on stablecoin type projects right now. But again, it's not going to happen overnight, and I think it comes down to patience.
And obviously, as part of your distribution business, regulation, so the regulatory part is very important. What do you think are the headwinds of this revolution? Is it the regulation? Is it the governments intervening? What might stop it, and to what extent it might affect it negatively?
I can start off. I think regulation is definitely a big part of it, but people have to take a step back and not think it's regulation, it's them against us. In fact, I think regulation and this whole innovation of cryptocurrencies and Bitcoin, et cetera, can coexist. And in fact, I think it's slowly coming to light, because regulation's there not to suppress innovation necessarily. It's there to protect a lot of these investors. It's there to protect the general public. So I think if companies start working with the regulators, and in fact, we are speaking to the regulators quite often on helping them develop that regulation, so that way both the commercial objectives of companies are realized, as well as the protections that investors need are realized as well. So I think it will come, but I think it's not something that one doesn't need to look at it and quite frankly it's a haggard answer to say it's us against them. Regulation's going to keep it down. Not necessarily. I think regulations will provide a bit of a framework, and people can work within it. And I think the regulators and the rules are somewhat flexible in the sense that if there is a commercial objective, they will look to try to achieve that in some way.
Thanks, Mike. You want to add anything?
Yeah, so at a global scale, nothing's going to stop cryptocurrency. At its core, it's decentralized blockchain, and it's a token on top of it, which means no government, and that's the beauty. And that's how Bitcoin started in 2009. When the global financial crisis happened in 2008, it came out as an antithesis, right? Anti-government, anti-centralization, anti-regulation. That's how it started out. But now, as the crypto market grows, it's going to be regulated, right? So maybe in certain countries where you over-regulate, the market could disappear, but it will just go underground. And at a global level, it's not going to stop, right? So as I think Elliot mentioned, how do you coexist, right? And it's not only the regulators, it's also working with banks. It's also working with tax authorities because this is one of their biggest income in decades, right? So when you look at that, the early days of crypto being ideology-driven, that it was the anti-government days are now over. Now it's going to be emerging towards mainstream finance, and that's when regulators come in. So it's actually a wonderful time to be in this space.
Fantastic, and that's actually a great segue to start our next section, where precisely we're going to talk or to look a little bit about what's been happening with the blockchain. Specifically, as Mike was saying, we had the first sort of phase, the blockchain 1.0, where these currencies were created with a philosophy of decentralization, no centralized banking, no rules, no governance other than that of the network, followed by a second phase, perhaps a more technical one, where smart contracts started emerging with currencies such as Ethereum, the programmable blockchain, computer code enforced transactions, and virtual machines. Elements that have been more technical in nature, more complex, that have actually seen an industry emerging with more companies showing some business models that are more viable and perhaps actual companies as opposed to products or pure products emerging. And now a third phase, and all of this obviously it's happening in fairly fast, where we started talking about, or decentralized apps are coming into play, and I will ask Elliot in a second about one example here, Civic, given that Elliot actually led the ICO for Civic. We've also seen how the blockchain industry has also progressively moved from the so-called public blockchain, where we basically need the acceptance or assent of all the members in the blockchain, which has created some issues of speed, to enterprise blockchains, the emergence of more exchanges. Obviously, the mining industry, huge, and arguably also at a high cost to the environment because of the electricity consumed to mint and to keep programming to generate these coins, and also the world of remittances, what everyone is probably aware of, that actually the affects trillions of dollars as a market, is one of the biggest areas of FinTech, remittances, and arguably digital currencies are also disrupting that through the blockchain. We also see many industries that are being transformed, new companies emerging, even existing companies, incumbents that are creating their own groups. At Rakuten, we have our blockchain lab based out of Ireland, and increasingly more engineers dedicated to this practice. JP Morgan has their own blockchain group. Different banks are playing with the concept. We've seen the phenomenon of certain US companies that have announced they're going to become blockchain companies. The Long Island iced tea company, they renamed themselves, I believe, like the Long Island blockchain company, and their stock went through the roof. Or even traditional companies such as Kodak, also rising in value as a result of announcing their ICOs. I think the easiest comparison probably between the public blockchain and the enterprise blockchain would be comparable, or the public blockchain would be comparable to the open internet, whereas the enterprise blockchain would be more comparable to the intranet. One of them, the public blockchain, it's actually slower. Everybody can participate, but if you have the assent of all participants, it slows things down, and that's actually being resolved through the emergence of enterprise blockchains. So the biggest issue, as we see on the left-hand side of this slide, that if you want to have general consensus, if you want to have scale, and if you want to have decentralization, something's got to give, because it's very difficult to have all three at once, partly because you just get like too many parties involved. And that's why there are some scalability solutions right now that are emerging through EOS, Ethereum, IOTA, different companies that are emerging. So this would be, and I'll leave you with this idea, similar to having a democracy where everybody has to vote on every single issue. If we were to conduct a referendum on every single rule in society, on every single rule in politics, basically the world would become ungovernable. That's very challenging. So as such, I guess, the first question to our panelists is, what blockchain cases are you guys most excited about?
I can start. I mean, I think for me, it's two primary areas. One is identity verification, or IDV. We're seeing a lot of companies like Civic, who actually was one of the first ones that focused on that area. There was one that we're working on right now called Nuggets out of the UK. Again, also focused on identity verification. We're dealing with a few Chinese companies who are working on that. So I think that as a application layer of blockchain is definitely an exciting area. The other, actually, on your chart was is the financial services banking area. I think, right, coming from a traditional Wall Street background, whether it's an IPO or through the settlement or distribution of stock, having blockchain for that is phenomenal, and I think you're seeing a lot of traditional banks exploring that option because of the speed, the cost, and the settlement mechanisms are made quicker. So I think for me, I think those are the two areas that are quite exciting at the moment.
Mike?
Yeah, so I think it's important to first make it clear that blockchain is not for every industry, right? There's industries or applications that are better to be centralized, which prefers maybe higher performance, or it doesn't need to be in a distributed network at all, right? So from that perspective, there is a fair amount of hype around blockchain. And there was a period of free lunch where you say, I'm going to decentralize this, I'm going to decentralize that. I think those days are gone, and people are becoming more realistic. What are the applications? What are certain industries that can truly make a difference by using a distributed ledger-based technology? And I would have to say it's the financial industry. By far, you can talk about logistics, supply chain, and all of these as well. But when you look at the financial industry, the way it has been operated for the last, 50 years, 80 years, hasn't really changed, right? There's a big headquarters, there's all these branches, they have centralized banking systems, they use paper and coins. That is bound to change. You might not notice that when you live in Japan or like the US, but when you go to emerging markets, where to this date, the largest city, the biggest building are always banks, but when you go to the rural markets, 70% of the population are either unbanked or underbanked. That means there's a limitation of financial services to reach the masses. But with blockchain and with smartphone, essentially you have banking services or financial services in your palm. And that's where a shared ledger, a blockchain service will come in, especially when there's a lot of counterparties, or there's different people who need to tap into the same database to provide services. Because when you look at financial services, it's not only money in, money out. There's investments, there's financing, there's loans, there's many things that surround that same financial services. And to me, all of that could be on top of the blockchain. So that's what I'm most excited about.
And just to add to that, it's actually quite interesting you mentioned that because we've seen an uptick this year of blockchain-related companies or blockchain tech-focused companies coming out of Africa, where there's a lot of unbanked people. So companies out of Nigeria, Kenya, Ghana, even the Congo, we're seeing, and so it's an interesting, and because they're focused on that problem exactly, is the unbanked, that financial services area.
Actually, even in developed countries, right? When I want to do an international transfer, even as of today, it will take 3 to 5 business days. And even in Japan, if I want to wire more than like $50,000, I would actually have to go to a branch and show, even if it's my own money, I cannot wire that. Well, if you use a smartphone and like Bitcoin, yeah, it might take 10 minutes, but you can wire across the globe real time for almost free.
And you know, what's actually quite fascinating about what you guys are saying, I mean, in terms of, I guess, you know, places or regions which, well, perhaps because of their economic nature, you know, like, we speak about Africa, are not necessarily the best known for their technology, although, you know, I guess there's been some prescient places, such as, I guess, like Tanzania, right, where, you know, people were transferring money with cell phones, not even smartphones. But does it take a lot to become a blockchain engineer? Where is the talent coming from? Because most tech companies are always struggling to get good talent, to find the engineers. Is there like a new emerging industry of engineers? Where are these people being trained? Is it very difficult to code in this space?
Actually, I think even more so in crypto and blockchain, it's much more, the scarcity of talent is probably, I would say, magnitudes more than just IT or engineering. If it's just building apps on the blockchain or smart contract, then I think a general IT or engineer would be okay. But if you want to build the next generation blockchain, like blockchain 3.0, you need heavy mathematics and physics, and there's not a lot of people who can do that right now. And that's why it's extremely difficult. And unfortunately, when I look into Japan, there's not a lot of talent there. So I would need to go globally to procure that talent. And that's on the core blockchain itself. Now, when you look at security on blockchain, there's that element of cyber security and blockchain, which makes it even more difficult.
Yeah, and you definitely see that. I mean, just the evidence, I would say, there's not that many protocol layer type technologies or companies coming because of the lack of blockchain developers and engineers. But you see tons of, allegedly blockchain applications that are coming out because, you know, people with this type of background can do that. But the actual protocols makes it, you know, it's extremely difficult, and you have to have that very smart, mathematically inclined individual. And there's just not that many of them. I mean, in my experience, I haven't necessarily seen a particular region or an area. You have to go global, and you see companies with engineers based out of Eastern Europe and then somewhere in Asia and somewhere in the US, simply because they're just not congregating in one area. It's individuals that you're picking off. But again, we're early, so hopefully as schools and this becomes a bit more formalized the education, hopefully that will lead to more and more of these individuals and developers coming to fruition.
Great. So we're going to move to our last section before the Q&A on the ICO fundamentals. As everybody in this room knows, initial coin offerings have been very popular. A lot of people in Japan are buying these tokens apart from digital currencies. What effectively these coin offerings do is that certain entities, normally foundations, and a lot of them Swiss-based, actually, because of the favorable regime, registered as non-for-profits, are issuing these tokens, which will provide a form of economic reward in the future for a project that is not even in existence right now, most of which are actually going to be blockchain-based. The ICOs have raised close to 5 billion since inception. It's not something that came up last year, but actually about 2 to 3 years ago. And what's actually very interesting, if you look at this chart, is that more funding has been raised with ICOs than even pure equity raisings for blockchain companies that we were talking about before. As a matter of fact, there's been about 4 more times ICOs than pure blockchain companies funded with equity. And when we look at the charts, definitely last year, the numbers are staggering. Even in the last quarter of 2017, close to $3 billion were raised in ICOs. And if we look at the ICO statistics, and my apology, well, these are for 2017. Actually, when was your ICO?
Actually, 2017 November.
Okay, so we got the wrong stats here. We haven't listed QUOINE, which would be sort of in the middle of this chart. Some projects have with close to 100 million raised. There's been some projects that have raised close to 200. The one at the top, HDAC, raised about $260 million. Some of them actually have had issues, and some of them have been fraudulent or now are being clamped by the regulators. And in 2018, Telegram raised close to $1.7 billion, and the EOS ICO continues to raise money. So they've actually raised more than 700 million as of today. And when you look at the categories, Mike was talking earlier on about finance, which represents close to 15% of what ICOs are raising, but also in line with Elliot's comments about how this is a nascent industry. We see how over a quarter of these ICOs are raising money for infrastructure. So we continue to build this industry, or we're sowing the seeds of what this will become in the future. And we also see some failures of 2017. Close to 27% of the ICOs have resulted in failures, as in they didn't secure enough funding. And what's also very interesting is that the ICO industry, or the ICO phenomenon, is disrupting professions like my own. As a venture capitalist, now people don't need to come to me to raise funding, because they can just go straight into the market and start issuing tokens. Thank you. So, well, this leads to the question of, perhaps you guys could explain why these tokens are so important.
Yeah, so I can start out, because while we're also an exchange, we did our own ICO last November. And to this date, we're still the largest ICO in Asia. And just putting things into perspective, the largest FinTech company that went public last year, Money Forward, raised, I think, 45억 원 with their IPO. And we raised over 100 million. Right, so when you look at that from that angle, I think ICO is the best thing that happened for the cryptocurrency industry. And I look at it more from a startup perspective. As an entrepreneur myself, when I start a company, and until this ICO method was available, I had to go to a VC. Right, I would go to you. I would go to a handful of early stage VCs, and they will actually control my destiny. Right, if they don't like your product or your vision, essentially you cannot raise capital, and you're done. While ICO is very different, where you can raise capital through cryptocurrency from the community that supports your vision, the community that wants to help you build your product. And through purchasing that token, they contribute in your capital raising. And once your product is ready, once your platform can be launched, they use that token as a utility to pay for the services that they want to consume. So essentially, it allows the entire ecosystem or the value chain who support your vision to participate in your fundraising and potentially enjoy the upside as well. So it's actually the best thing that could happen for a startup.
And actually, if I may, building on that, I'll ask Elliot to perhaps clarify a little bit for the audience the difference between utility and security tokens, and also the implications, because the regulators are clamping down on some of these issues. And unfortunately, as with anything new, there's been a certain element of fraud, or people, similar to crowdfunding, where folks are raising money for projects that do not materialize in the future. I think there's been a closer attention being paid to utility versus security. Elliot?
Yeah, so actually that's a great question, because I had to recently explain this on Bloomberg TV, between the difference between utility versus security. And the way I explain it very simplistically is, picture a utility token as if you were to enter into a video game arcade. You go in, you put your dollars, your yen, and they give you, in return, they give you a token. And that token can only be used in that video game arcade place to play those particular video games. But you can't go down the street, you can't go to the next city to enter into another arcade and use those same tokens. So the whole point of these utility tokens there are unique and for use only on that specific platform. Now, the security aspect of it, the way, simplistically again, the way I view it is think of like a stock, right? You're buying a security generally because you're looking for some sort of investment profit. There is an investment of money as well. So right now, because of the regulations, especially in the U.S., the view is that a lot of companies are actually even are selling through their ICO security tokens instead of, even though they might call it a utility token, because people are not buying it necessarily to use on their specific platform. For instance, a big crypto whale is not going to buy 5 million use tokens on a platform. There's probably no use for that. He's probably buying it, he or she is probably buying it because there's a speculative value. There's an expectation of profit. Just like if you buy, 5 million shares of Apple, you're assuming that Apple stock will go up and you'll make some money and you'll sell it on an exchange. In the same concept here, from a security point of view, with these ICO tokens, people are buying these tokens because they are expecting these tokens to get on some sort of exchange somewhere. It increases in profit, then they sell and they make their profit. So the SEC, from the U.S. perspective, the regulator is looking down and saying that these are all security tokens in their view. So they want to make sure that there's proper regulation. The companies who are doing these ICOs are fully disclosing all material information, whether it's how it's built, the background to the financial. So that's kind of what's going through the minds of the regulators now, and you're slowly seeing it happen in other parts of the world as well.
Great. So we're running out of time, so I wanted to open it to the audience. We have time for perhaps one or two questions for our guests. So if we can see the gentleman here in the fourth row, please. Do you have a mic for our guest? Please introduce yourself.
Thank you very much. First of all, I'm an investor of QUOINE.
Thank you.
Congratulations.
ICO. Well, I'm a kind of a fan of blockchain, and I'm expecting for long-term growth. I really believe in it. But I'm from an IT background, and I went through all the .com, and it took 20 years until from zero to, life without internet is no life, no internet, like situation right now. So I think it at least take 10 more years until to that level of rollout. What do you think? How long does it take to that level of a situation?
Mike, can I take that?
Yeah, I'll start out. Well, first and foremost, thank you so much. You can buy more. But so in the internet, Actually, it's taken much longer. I would say it's more like 40 years since NASA started looking into the internet protocol. But from a mass consumer adoption perspective, I think there was a Netscape moment. That was when Netscape, the browser, made the internet a commodity for anybody to come in if they had a personal computer. With the combination of Windows and Netscape, I think that's when it really spurred the growth of internet. And then when mobile internet came in, it really took to the next level. I think it will take similar paths, but it might be more condensed, right? So when you look at Bitcoin, it's still only 9 years. When you look at Ethereum, which is a more advanced version of blockchain, which has smart contract, it's only 3 to 4 years. When you look at that, the next 5 years, the next 10 years, the next 20 years are going to be pretty amazing moments where I think everybody here is going to be the witness of one of the largest, I could say, revolution or evolution since the internet. And I think, and it's going to have deep social impact in whatever sector you are in. So it's not only speculation or investing, but in many other assets or industries. So from that perspective, I will look at another maybe 10 years where you will see many implications and positive ripple effects that happen in your everyday life. And that's when I think it's really going to have mass adoption.
Thank you very much. One final question very quickly. The gentleman back there in the 9th row.
Thank you very much. I'm interested in Monaco, not Monacoin, but Monaco. The reason why, because Monaco can use a Visa card. They work with Visa. Yeah. Honestly, I like cryptocurrency. However, most of Japanese people misunderstand cryptocurrency. When I bought Bitcoin, my family is worrying. Doubtful, dangerous, strange, very sad. But for example, like Monaco, if a coin work with JCB, Argon work with Amex, Rakuten work with Master, they can trust, honestly. Basically, now a cryptocurrency is invest or commodity. But I hope more familiar and more major for most of people, many people. Thank you.
Elliot, you want to?
I can start out as well. So we partner with Monaco, right? Monaco is another new distribution to use cryptocurrency where you can charge your debit card, the Monaco card, which is, they have a partnership with Visa, so that you can use in all of the Visa network. So to me, this is just part of the utility element of cryptocurrency becoming much more mass, right? But I think I shared you a slide in one of my introduction to the younger generation. Cryptocurrency is the future. That is the preferred asset class that people want to buy and hold, spend and give and receive. So when you look at that, I look at the younger generation X and the generation after that. For them, everything is digital. Currency is going to be digital. And it's not only going to be confined to one nation or one geography, it's going to be borderless, right? So from that perspective, it will take a little bit more time. But again, no one trusted the internet when it came. It was all about porn. It was all about drugs. It was all about these things that were so-called dangerous. And crypto is going through that same growing pains.
Thank you very much. I'm just going to ask you to make one parting comments, perhaps a recommendation to some of the blockchain or future blockchain entrepreneurs we might have in the audience.
Well, I think the way to end this off is that, as I was saying, it's a long race. It's a marathon. I think we're in the very, very early stages. Just take a step back and realize that because there's a lot of noise going on outside right now, it's not a reason to think that it's all over. There is a need for correction. It was going a little crazy, but this correction is I think necessary, and with the regulation, it's going to flush out a lot of the frauds, a lot of the scammers, a lot of the speculators, and hopefully we'll have a bit more stability going forward.
Yeah, so I would like to end it with this, where when I still talk to even my parents, they think cryptocurrency is risky, it's dangerous. I actually think that if you're not in this industry, it's going to be risky. When you look at the next 5, 10, 20 years, do you believe that your company, your industry will be as is today? Especially in the days of technology and advancement and blockchain and crypto, I think as a person who is coming into the workforce or who is looking for the next big opportunity, I think crypto and blockchain is it. So when I look at it from a risk perspective, I think not coming into this industry is the biggest risk.
Thanks very much. I also wanted to thank the audience and a big round of applause to our speakers. Thank you.